Good afternoon, and welcome to Accessing SBA Products and Services, the SBA Intermediary Microlending Program, presented by the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. This webinar is brought to you through a grant from the SBA, the Prime Grant of 2019. Small dollar loans are essential to the formation of growth of small businesses in underserved communities. Often, entrepreneurs need only $50,000 or less to launch a business. We will go over the steps needed to become an approved microloan program intermediary lender by the U.S. Small Business Administration. In this webinar, NALCAB consultant Jeannie Shaw will share her expertise from over 30 years of experience in securing funding, building capacity, and implementing community and economic development projects throughout the United States. This webinar is being recorded. We've placed everyone on mute, and we will be sharing the recording and the slides in a follow-up email. Our agenda for today is we'll quickly run through welcome and introductions. We will talk about becoming an SBA lender and the application process, followed by questions and answers. And then we'll also be sharing COVID-19 resources. Please note that at any point in time, you can enter a question into the chat message box, and we will try to address your questions throughout the webinar. If not throughout the webinar, then during the Q&A section. All right, on to our welcome and introductions. My name is Storm Taliaferro. I'm a senior program manager here at NALCAB, working in small business, and I'm accompanied by Natalia Chavez, program specialist, who also works in small business development and TA, and with our fellowship program. Also assisting us is Iman Saleh, who is running the slide deck. So thank you very much, Iman. Today, our consultant, Jeannie Shaw, is leading the discussion. She's a professional with nonprofit organization management experience who has helped produce housing and economic development projects throughout Central and Western U.S. Her technical assistance and capacity building services have helped nonprofit organizations develop housing, economic, and community development projects, renewable energy facilities, loan funds, small business programs, job creation strategies, job training, and employment programs. She has more than 15 years of experience serving in executive management roles at small and large nonprofits, and has served as guest speaker and instructor at numerous conferences, including NALCAB's national training, and conferences representing the interests of urban and rural nonprofit organizations. With that said, I'd like to turn it over to our presenter today, Jeannie Shaw. Jeannie, thank you so much for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. I just wanted to make sure, and I wanted to thank everyone who's joined us on the webinar and is showing an interest in what it would take to become an SBA lender. There are some specific steps, but I think it provides a resource for a lot of nonprofit organizations to expand their capacity. So what is the purpose of SBA? If we could go to the next slide, Iman. Yes, thank you. SBA was established in 1953 with the intention to provide aid, counsel, assistance, and protect the interests of small businesses. And you can see on the national level that they are a very strong advocate for the interests of small business. SBA can be best known for its financial support of small businesses through its many lending programs, but it also plays a critical role by providing funding to organizations that deliver training and technical assistance to small business concerns and emerging entrepreneurs to support their growth, expansion, innovation, or increase their productivity and management capacity. So it can really serve a number of levels of small businesses. Next slide. There are three types of SBA lenders. 7A lenders are, and the CDC 504 program lenders are typically larger type loan programs. So let me explain it. An SBA 7A lender administers that program is administered as a deferred participation program where SBA guarantees part of the loan made by the 7A lender, up to 90%, I believe. And the lender initiates the loan. If SBA agrees to guarantee the loan, then the loan is funded and the lender services that loan. Those loans range from $50,000 to $5 million. In the event of a default, the lender then would conduct any workout or liquidation efforts, and the lender and SBA share in the loss. So if SBA has funded up to 90% of the loan, they would cover 90% of the loss. There are requirements for 7A lenders. They have to have the ability to evaluate, process, close, disperse, service, and liquidate small business loans. They're open to the public to issue loans. They must have good character and reputation, and there are ethical requirements that they must maintain. And they must be supervised or examined by a state or federal regulatory authority. The types of lenders that typically become SBA 7A lenders are federally regulated lenders or SBA supervised lenders or small business lending companies referred to by SBA as SBLCs. SBLCs are non-depository lending institutions authorized by SBA to only make loans pursuant to the 7A program and loans to intermediaries in the SBA microloan program. So they are another source where an SBA microlender could receive some funding. The SBLCs are regulated and supervised, as I mentioned, and they're subject to regulations specific to their formation, capitalization, and enforcement actions. They have to comply with all the regulations of 7A regarding origination, servicing, and liquidation of loans. And they are required to analyze each application in a commercially reasonable manner consistent with prudent lending standards. The SBA 504 loan program is an economic development program that offers loans up to $5 million to provide long-term, low-down payment, reasonably priced fixed-rate financing to stimulate private sector investment in fixed assets or to increase productivity, create jobs, or enhance the local tax base. 504 loans are issued through a partnership with certified development companies, CDCs, and the private sector. Third-party lenders that finance up to 50% of the project costs receive a senior lien position. The 504 loan provided by the CDC is guaranteed by SBA. That loan is in a junior lien position for up to 40% of the cost. That means between those two sources, they provide 90% of the funding. The borrower must provide at least 10% equity contribution toward the total project cost. A 504 lender, CDC, is a nonprofit that's in good standing, set up to contribute to economic development in its community. They work with SBA and private sector lenders to provide growing businesses with long-term fixed-rate financing. They must have a board of directors with at least 9 voting members. I thought that was interesting. And the board must have backgrounds and expertise in commercial lending, internal controls, financial risk management, and legal issues relating to commercial lending. They are required to have a professional and full-time management and lending staff. They need to meet an annual minimum of lending activity in order to be designated a CDC. So there are some other requirements related to CDCs, but I think we're most interested in what is the SBA microloan program. So next slide. If you could go to the next, yes, thank you. So the SBA microloan program is intended to assist women, low-income individuals, minority entrepreneurs, and other small businesses that need small amounts of financial assistance. And under this program, SBA makes direct and guaranteed loans to intermediaries, which would be the nonprofit organizations receiving the SBA funds, who in turn would then lend the proceeds to make loans to eligible borrowers. The microloan program provides intermediaries, which would be your organization as an SBA microlender, to fund small businesses with working capital or to buy inventory, supplies, furniture, fixtures, machinery, and equipment. Notice I didn't mention acquisition or construction. Both of those activities require an environmental review. By providing SBA funds only for inventory, supplies, furniture, fixtures, machinery, equipment, that's considered an exempt activity, so it would not be required to go through environmental review, so that you can see where your funds are best used. I think when a borrower comes to you and says, I have a project that I want to build this, but I need this equipment, you know you can fund the equipment and help them find funding for the construction. SBA may also make grants under the program to intermediaries and other qualified nonprofit organizations that can be used for marketing, management, and technical assistance. So next slide. Who can be an intermediary microlender? And this is not a very high bar to meet. You must have prior experience. In other words, having made and serviced short-term loans of not more than $50,000. So the loans are under $50,000 to newly established or growing small businesses, and you have to have done that for at least 1 year. And then also have at least 1 year of experience providing technical assistance to those same borrowers. And 1 year of experience in providing in-house marketing and management to that particular target market. There is a limitation that you must serve only one state, because if you were going to serve, if you're on a border with another state, there are steps that you can go through to serve 2 states, but it does get more complicated. You have to go through the Office of Capital Access, which would determine if it's in the best interest of the small business community for your organization to operate across state lines. And an SBA microlender is a private nonprofit or can be quasi-public or tribally owned. Next slide. Specialized intermediaries, at the end of the first year of participation in the program, the SBA will evaluate the performance of your organization to determine if you can be qualified as a specialized intermediary. That depends on the type of lending practices that you carried out during that 1 year. And what qualifies you for that? If you maintain a portfolio of microloans averaging $10,000 or less, then you qualify for favorable interest rates on SBA. And so if after the first year you're determined to be a specialized intermediary, they can apply that specialized interest rate retroactive to the loans that you made. And you can also qualify for a greater amount of technical assistance funding. So there is an incentive to serve that part of the market where they need very small loans. I think with serving that particular part of the market, you will see that it's necessary to provide a higher level of technical assistance for those small and emerging businesses. So it's very good that you can access some additional technical assistance funding. Next slide. Terms and conditions on SBA microloans, they will allow you to borrow up to $750,000 in the first year, and then in subsequent years you may borrow up to $1,250,000. They will not borrow more than $5 million to any one intermediary. So as you borrow funds and pay them back, SBA is monitoring that they have not invested more than $5 million into your program. During the first year of the loan, you're not required to make any payments, but interest will accrue. That's to give you a period of time to get loans made and start to generate some revenue. And after that, SBA will determine the periodic payments that are necessary. The loan is typically paid back in 10 years. The interest rate charged is typically equal to the rate applicable to 5-year obligations of the U.S. Treasury, and they adjust that to the nearest 1/8. However, specialized intermediaries, as I mentioned, are able to get a better interest rate. So they're equal to the 5-year obligations with the larger adjustment of less 2%. So if the 5-year obligations are 3%, the specialized intermediary would have a loan at 2%. And if just an SBA intermediary, their loan rate would be 1.75. That's just an example. As you know, we live in some interesting times with interest rates these days. Collateral, next slide. SBA will require that they have a first lien on the account where you hold the microloan revolving funds and your loan loss reserve funds, and all notes receivable for microloans. In other words, if you default on your loan, those are the things that they can take back to make themselves whole. If for any reason under default you're unable to make a payment to SBA, they can accelerate the maturity date and demand payment in full. My experience is that they have been willing to bend over backwards to avoid that. But that will ultimately come about if you're not able to eventually work something out. Or if you violate any part of their agreement, they will can also call the loan due. While the intermediary is not obligated to pay SBA for any loss or deficiency that may remain after liquidation of their collateral, you will be obligated if there is any fraud, negligence, or violation of any ethical requirements. SBA does not charge any fees to intermediaries. They do allow intermediaries to charge fees to their borrowers, the end user. So that would include minimal closing costs such as filing and recording fees. The SBA microloans requires the intermediary to provide a 15% cash match from non-federal, non-borrowed funds. Next slide. So that can be from if you have other loan loss reserve funds or you've got other assets, cash assets that are non-federal, can qualify. If you have questions, we can always talk more about that. The micro revolving loan fund is a deposit account into which the intermediary must deposit all the proceeds from SBA and all of its contributions from non-federal sources that are used for match and the payments from the microloan borrowers. You can only withdraw from that account for money to establish the loan loss reserve or to make proceeds to fund a microloan or to make payments to SBA. So that microloan revolving fund is truly there specifically for funding microloan activities. The loan loss reserve fund is another deposit account that they require, and loan loss reserves are used to cover any shortage in the case of delinquencies or loan losses. The level that's required for a loan loss reserve until your microloan program is at least 5 years old, you have to maintain a balance of 15% of the outstanding balance of the notes receivable. So as you make loans, and this is where your match can come in, you can use your match to contribute to loan loss reserve to cover those losses. And of course, the funding is also used for technical assistance. The technical assistance funds can be deposited into your general operating fund, but they only allow one grant per intermediary. So you can't have overlapping grants. You have to receive one grant and then another. Next slide. SBA grant funds that are used for technical assistance is not more than 25% of the outstanding balance of all SBA loans made to the intermediary. So if you have a $750,000 SBA fund award, your maximum technical assistance funds is $187,500. And then you have to contribute for the grant funds, you have to provide 25% of non-federal match funds. And contributions can be cash or in kind. So if you're contributing space to provide your technical assistance, or you're using volunteers to provide some services for your businesses, that sort of thing can be counted as in kind. Of course, if you're a lender making SBA loans, you cannot borrow from yourself. SBA grant funds up to 25% can be used for providing information, marketing, managing the program, providing technical assistance to prospective and current microloan borrowers, and for attending training required by SBA. One of the things that I found is quite a few SBA microlenders use their microloan grant funds to provide technical assistance in servicing the loans, especially if borrowers are delinquent. And this is a funding source that helps you cover those costs, because that can get to be quite substantial if you have a lot of loans below $10,000. Specialized intermediaries may receive an additional SBA grant of 5% of the outstanding balance, which gives you an incentive to provide loans below $10,000. You can use your SBA funds to pay for third-party contracts for technical assistance, but you cannot use more than 25% of the grant funds for that. So if you received $187,000 TA funds, you could only use $46,875 for paying third-party consultants to provide services for your borrowers. Next slide. So you do not have to be an intermediary in order to obtain an SBA grant. You can apply to SBA for a grant to cover marketing, management, and technical assistance in amounts of $50,000 or less. So that is another avenue for you to access SBA funds. To qualify, you need to provide information regarding your organization's ability to provide technical assistance. And if approved, the grant would provide terms and conditions. SBA doesn't make more than 55 of those grants, and a grant may not exceed more than $200,000. Nonprofit entities still has to contribute 20% from non-federal sources as match for that particular grant. So to be an SBA microlender, turning the page here, there are minimum lending requirements that intermediaries, next slide, that intermediaries must adhere to. For the first year, they require that you make at least 4 microloans. For the second fiscal year, at least 6 microloans. In the third year, 8 microloans. And all fiscal years after that, you have to do a minimum of 10 microloans per year. If you do not meet the requirements of the minimum lending standards, you might be subject to a corrective action plan where you have to provide SBA with information on how you're going to meet those minimum lending requirements. So SBA loans range from $500 to $50,000 and are offered to startups and small businesses. Typically, those borrowers are women, minorities, veterans, low-income persons, and other underrepresented groups, or any for-profit small business. The microenterprise that's receiving the loan must meet SBA small business size standards. Neither the microenterprise nor the owner can be debarred from receiving federal funds. So you do have to check the debarred contractor list to ensure that that borrower has not been restricted from receiving federal funds. SBA does require that they have a minimum credit score of 575, or borrowers must have at least an average minimum credit score. Most intermediaries work with credit scores of 575 or higher. And then the borrower has to demonstrate the ability to repay the loan by using their existing cash flow from the business, or if the business isn't generating revenue yet, then from financial projections. So this is where it becomes important for you and your ability to underwrite those loans. Next slide. So what is the typical qualification of a business that's going to receive an SBA microloan? They do need to provide a business plan, and some SBA intermediaries will help organizations prepare their business plans as part of their technical assistance, and others will refer them to the local Small Business Development Center, sometimes at a community college, or they will recommend that they work with volunteers from SCORE. Somehow they do need to have a business plan that provides information on the background of the borrower and their experience in managing the business's value proposition. In other words, what is it that the business is going to be doing to generate revenue? There needs to be an analysis of the target market and competitors, and then a description of marketing and growth strategies. How do they plan to grow and reach their target market? They do require financial statements or projections for 3 to 5 years. And then, of course, the borrower should demonstrate that they have good character, which usually means they don't have a criminal record for dishonesty, fraud, theft, or burglary. Having a criminal record doesn't automatically disqualify a borrower, but it can make qualifying a little more difficult. And no owner of more than 50% of the business is allowed to be more than 60 days delinquent in child support payments. Next slide. So for collateral, the business does need to provide collateral, which can be equipment, accounts receivable, real estate, personal assets like their car, their home, personal property. Any other assets that are purchased with loan proceeds can become collateral. And in addition to the collateral, the borrower must agree that they personally guarantee the loan. SBA microloans cannot be longer than 6 years in terms, and the interest rate needs to be a fixed rate over those 6 years or less. And interest rates are established by each microlender. I only had figures for 2017. The average interest rate was 7.5. It's probably lower now, given our current circumstances. Next slide. So microloan borrowers can be asked to pay reasonable out-of-pocket costs for closing the loan or filing UCC filing reports or obtaining credit reports. They can be required to make an annual contribution of $100 for administrative charges because a lot of times the interest rates so low are not providing sufficient revenue for your organization to service the loan, so an administrative fee would help to cover mailing out statements and providing information on payoff amounts, etc. And late fees usually are not more than 5% of the payment due. Next slide. So if a borrower is receiving a microloan of more than $20,000, they do require that they provide information they've attempted to get credit elsewhere but have been unable to. And that can mean that the credit they're attempted to obtain is being offered to them at such a high interest rate that it makes that loan infeasible to use, or the particular place where they went to apply for a loan says they don't provide businesses to, or loans to businesses that small, it doesn't necessarily mean they've got a very poor credit record and no way could they ever obtain a loan. There's some other reason for them not being able to obtain credit elsewhere. No single borrower or business can owe more than $50,000 on an SBA loan or a combination of SBA loans to you at any time. But you have the ability to restructure those SBA loans as long as the term of the loan does not exceed 72 months, which can help in situations where we are right now. There's a lot of businesses that are looking to restructure the terms of their loans, maybe receive a waiver to not be required to make payments for a period of time, and tack on the months that were waived on the back end of the loan so that the loan would be paid in full. They are able to refinance microloans, and if you restructure or refinance a microloan, you are required to provide reports in the microloan electronic reporting system. When a loan is more than 120 days delinquent or is in default, they must be charged off. There's not a may, it's a must. Next slide. So, what is the application process to become an SBA intermediary? Next slide. First thing, I think, and most important, is to build a relationship with your local SBA district director. Get to know him, get to know what they're currently doing in your market area, who are SBA lenders in your market area. The SBA doesn't like to fund any new intermediaries that are going to compete with existing intermediaries serving the same target market. So if you're able to determine that the clients that you're serving are an underserved market, they're definitely going to be happy to talk to you about becoming an SBA intermediary lender. So it's really a good idea for you to get to know that SBA district director, but come in hand with information. And one of the points of information that I think is critical is to know what is the percentage of Latino businesses in your area, and what is the percentage of Latino population. If you have a Latino population that, say, I'm going to pick a figure here, 35% of the population is Latino, and yet you have Latino businesses are only 5% of the population, there's a gap. There's a reason why you want to serve that target market. So go in hand with that information. I have found that people who work for SBA are very well aware of what's going on in their target market. So they can provide some additional information for you from their perspective as well. So first step in applying is to contact your SBA to obtain information on the application process. They can provide you with forms, but the forms are available online too. Documentation that you need to provide in your application includes narrative statements that describe the types of businesses that you've assisted in the past and who you intend to serve with microloans, the average size of the loans that you've made in the past and the average size of loans you intend to make, and the extent to which the applicant will make microloans to small businesses in rural areas. Next slide. They also are very interested to know the geographic area that you intend to operate in, and they are looking for information that describes the economic and demographic conditions that exist in that target area. And then also an analysis of what is the availability and cost for small businesses to obtain credit in your area. So if you know that small businesses must provide credit scores of 640 or higher, or they must provide collateral at 100% of the value of the loan, or if they are required to, or if they can only fund up to 80% of the loan, that sort of funding conditions that small businesses encounter. That's all very useful information to describe what's the credit situation for small businesses that are seeking loans in that area. They also want to know what your experience and qualifications are in providing marketing, management, and technical assistance. And so if you can provide examples of your, if you provide workshops and training curriculums, that's all very helpful to explain. And then any other plans to use technical assistance resources from other sources like, as I mentioned, SCORE or SBDC entities. They do like to see that you have those partnerships in case the businesses need them. Next slide. So in evaluating the applications, SBA is going to, their primary concern is to make sure that microloans are available to small businesses in all industries, particularly to small businesses in urban and rural areas. They have a preference for working with organizations that make very small loans. And in selecting intermediaries, they're going to give a priority to applicants that maintain a portfolio of loans averaging $10,000 or less, which qualifies you to be a specialized intermediary. Next slide. So how does your organization, this is continuing on how your organization becomes an SBA lender and how that benefits your organization. First of all, it can bring access to new capital to serve microbusinesses. And grant funds can be used to cover the cost of providing technical assistance. SBA also has a program to help your organization connect with borrowers through their lender match program, which I found very interesting how that works. SBA guarantees those loans too, so that in the event the loans are not fully repaid, you are not fully at risk of having to repay that loan. And you can work with borrowers that you typically wouldn't work with without an SBA guarantee. So I think that kind of wraps it up. Any questions?
Thank you so much. Excuse me. Thank you so much. That was great, and it was a lot of information. We do have a couple of questions already. At this point, I'd like to invite all attendees to type any questions you may have into the chat box and click send. So one question is there a NOFA for the SBA grants? And I believe you touched upon that, right? You have to reach out to your state SBA office.
Right. They do have a NOFA, but it's an open-ended NOFA where they announce the funds available, but you can apply for this anytime during the fiscal year.
Okay, and the applications themselves, do they differ by state or by office, or is it a uniform application?
It is definitely a uniform application. Okay, they have forms available through the SBA website or their offices.
Great. Another question we have here, and this is a question we do see from a number of our members as they begin going down this road towards becoming an SBA intermediary microlender, is how do you find out if there are other microloan intermediaries in your geographic area?
Well, sometimes you can do a search of SBA lenders, and it'll, you might be able to come up with 7A and CDCs that are operating in your area, but your area district director is definitely going to have that information. So they're a very good source for getting that. I've done searches for microlenders in specific areas, and they're not always easily detectable. It's really important to have that relationship with the district office.
Right. I've done it too. It's very difficult. So the first thing you could do is just Google. You can go to your state's SBA website, and quite often the local office will publish the top 7A lenders or top uh, microlending intermediaries in the area. But if you want a complete listing, you really do have to direct the question to your local SBA rep to get the best information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now what are some of the first steps an organization should take if they've never done lending before, but if they're currently doing small business technical assistance and they want to build their experience so that they can take those initial steps to um, even consider applying and having a strong application for this program?
So there is a requirement that you can demonstrate you've been lending for at least a year. They don't specify how much lending or how many loans you should have made. Obviously, the more you've done, the more qualified you will appear to SBA. First steps might be if you already have a sense of who your market is by providing them with technical assistance, and you can see what their loan and financing needs are. Sometimes organizations will take that information and apply to local community foundations or other regional foundations for some funding, or if you've got cash assets that you can use to fund an initial loan fund. Keep in mind that there is that requirement to provide matching funds, so it's a good idea to be looking for where you might be able to secure that from. So I know that, well, you could not use CDBG because that is a federal source of funds. But if you have initially received a CDBG allocation to provide loans and you've rolled that funding over a few times where it's no longer considered program income, now that would be eligible to be considered match. So it really depends on your organization.
Okay, so really know the need, and you can start to document that need through um, even surveys of the clients you serve, a needs assessment of those you serve or seek to serve, and then start identifying the funds. You mentioned sort of the rolling over of those CDBG funds. How about purchasing a loan portfolio from another organization? Um, does that count? Does their lending experience then transfer over to you?
No, I don't believe that it would transfer. They would want to see that after acquiring that loan portfolio that you have made loans for at least a year through your organization. So acquiring the loan portfolio is going to give you an asset to make loans with um, through revolved funds. That's another way to approach it. And I also wanted to mention that sometimes these smaller organizations will go to their local economic development offices. Sometimes the states will provide loan funds to small micro enterprise loan programs, and you can get loans through there. They are loans. They have to be paid back, but at least it can give you the cash necessary to start lending activities and get to demonstrate a one-year experience in making loans.
Okay, great. We have another question here. Um, the collateral guarantee on behalf of the borrower, does it have to reach a certain threshold, 50, 75, or 100% of the loan?
Well, I think for the sake of most sound borrowing, it's preferable that the collateral be equivalent to the amount of the loan. But I know that in determining value of equipment and things like that, you have to use your judgment. If, as you're aware, if you have a borrower who goes out and acquires brand new equipment and then they use it, it's like a new car taking it off the dealer lot. It immediately uses a value. So, having new equipment, it doesn't mean that you can turn around and sell it for the amount that they paid for it. So it's, really a judicious part on the lender as to what they are willing to accept.
Okay, thank you. Another question here is, does the intermediary need to obtain any sort of licensing? I know in California, this is true.
Yes, it depends on your state. If you were doing home mortgage lending, there's a federal law that says that you must be licensed, and then each individual state may have requirements for any type of lender to be licensed through the state. And California, we know, does that. I don't believe Arizona or Colorado or New Mexico or Texas requires that.
So if I were, say, in, one of the states you didn't mention, Minnesota, where on the state's website, might you go to find that information to discover if there's to discern if there's a need to obtain a lending license like in California?
Well, a lot of times that's going to go through the licensing division of the state.
Okay.
It depends on the state how they've got it structured. They may have it under their Corporation Commission department, or they may have a separate licensing department. So that's where you might want to start. I was going to say, I know that Nebraska doesn't require it either.
Okay. You don't know all
I think
50
it's
off the top?
uncommon.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
I think it's uncommon for a state to require that all lenders be licensed. But I'm not familiar with every state, so.
Okay. Let's see, our next question. Do you have to be a lender to obtain the $50,000 grant for non-intermediaries?
No, that grant, you can use it to provide technical assistance. So that's SBA Grants for non-intermediaries. You need to be able to demonstrate that you have experience in providing marketing. You can use those funds for marketing, management, and technical assistance. It doesn't require that you have a history of lending.
Okay. Let's see, our next question. If you have been lending to small businesses, but they are larger loans, will SBA take that into account in approving your application? Or are they strict in requiring you have to be placing microloans in the past?
Well, there's not a restriction on your ability to make larger loans. And I think anybody that looks at how you're managing a loan portfolio likes to spread the risk around. You have higher risk concentrated in smaller loans, and it seems that you have a lower risk level when you're working with more experienced borrowers and businesses. So it's a good idea to have a diverse loan portfolio. You can be an SBA lender if you make larger loans. It's just that with SBA loan funds, you can't make loans more than $50,000.
With the intermediary microloan
Yes.
funds, and so I think this question is from one of our members who does do larger loans, and I think what he's getting at is he's wondering, is it does it affect the level of experience you have to have with microlending?
They would want to see that you're working with small businesses, so they need to meet the definition of SBA's definition of small business. And, you know, you need to have, if all of your loans are well over $100,000, that might not demonstrate to SBA that you're working with these smaller businesses because of the amount of loan. So it really depends on who your target market is, and you know, what the loan sources were used for.
Okay. Let's see. Now this question says, so there is not an SBA percent requirement, not necessarily best practices, but actual requirement. Let's see, perhaps Mariela, if you could clarify, sort of restate that question. I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. I'll move on to the next one. 750,000 is the first loan amount to the lender.
Yes,
is
to the
interest,
SBA lender.
Right. Is interest accrued of funds lent or on the total 750,000?
It depends on how much you've drawn down.
Okay.
And interest accrues based on what you have drawn down.
Okay.
And during the first year, you're not required to make any payments, but interest will accrue on from the date that SBA disperses loan proceeds to the intermediary.
I see. Okay. That is it for all of the questions we have so far. Let's see, I believe you do have a little bit more to share with us. Please, if you have any more questions, please type them into the chat box on your screen, and we'll try to get them answered. If you come up with questions after this webinar, please feel free to email them to us, and we will get them answered and see about the support that we can provide. So at this point, I think we can move on from the Q&A, and I'll just pose any questions to you if they come up.
Okay, great.
So next slide, please, Iman.
Iman, can you go please to the next slide? Awesome. So thank you so much, Jeannie, for that information. It was great, and all your questions have been really valuable. So we also wanted to share that on our website at nalcab.org/COVID-19. We have some resources from newsroom, webinar opportunities, national COVID-19 resources for nonprofits and employers, also focusing on housing, financial capability, a small business, and even like work from home resources. So this is good information that some of you don't know we already have them. So we just wanted to share this with you as well. And next. And please connect with us on our social media channels. We have Facebook, Twitter, and we actually have an Instagram account as well. And of course, this is our website, nalcab.org. And next.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Oops, I'm sorry. We have a couple more questions here.
Oh, please go. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we have a clarification of the other question I didn't entirely understand. Okay, so Judy, you had mentioned collateral guarantee requirements, and you shared that you know, from best practices, it should be for the total amount of the loan. But this member is wondering what the actual SBA requirement is, rather than just the best practice.
I did not see any reference to minimum collateral requirements. They're just going to want to see that you are practicing sound lending practices. So obviously it depends on how you, the types of collateral that you are willing to accept and how you determine that value. So.
Okay. And I will add that, NALCAB is able to assist its members in developing lending policies and procedures to help, nail all of these things down and get them down in detail. And also we are able to provide peer-to-peer connections with existing lenders within our network who can share their experience. Okay. Another question. When you are an intermediary, are there any limitations in terms of having ITIN holders as borrowers?
Well, I do believe that they require that you're working with someone who is a citizen or is authorized to live or work in the United States.
Okay.
Because these are U.S. federal funds, so.
Okay, so yes, keep that in mind. Okay, and a further clarifying question that says, okay, so we don't have to draw down the total 750,000 just in increments. That's correct, right? It's
Yes,
drawn down
that's my
increments.
understanding, that as you draw them down, you will accrue interest from that draw.
Okay, and we did just have this question about ITIN holders. So not as not through an SBA intermediary microlending program, but if you are an SBA intermediary microlender or looking to become one, could you still use other funds to support borrowers who are undocumented?
And use that as match for the program?
No, I think this is just a general question.
Oh,
Does
it would
that
really
hurt your
depend
standing?
on. Oh, okay. It would really depend on the source of funds. I know that there are some foundations out there that will provide that kind of funding to finance undocumented people. But the U.S. Government programs are going to require that they meet that standard.
So it doesn't necessarily hurt an organization to be able to, who does use, independent funds
Right. That
to.
shouldn't hurt you. And as a matter of fact, if you're discussing your experience in providing microloans, you can discuss your experience in providing microloans. I don't know that you necessarily need. You could disclose that you're funding I-10 borrowers, but I don't know that it would be. Your experience is you're still making these loans. You're still servicing these loans. You're still serving that market. So I think that experience would still count.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. All right, if no one has any further questions, I'll turn it back over to Natalia to close us out. And if you have questions that come up over the next couple of days or weeks, anytime, please feel free to reach out to us at NALCAB, and we can help support you as you grow and strengthen your programs. Natalia?
Yes, thank you so much. And muchísimas gracias, everybody, for taking the time today to joining us during this webinar. As Storm mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Here is my email address. And please stay safe and stay in touch. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.